working in concert, have created a system of worldwide mass surveillance, watching everything we do. Great Britain's George Orwell warned us of the danger of this kind of information. The types of collection in the book, microphones and video cameras, TVs that watch us, are nothing compared to what we have available today. We have sensors in our pockets that track us everywhere we go. Think about what this means for the privacy of the average person. A child born today will grow up with no conception of privacy at all. They'll never know what it means to have a private moment to themselves, an unrecorded, unanalyzed thought. And that's a problem, because privacy matters.
Those are the words of NSA whistleblower Edward Snowden speaking in December. We turn now to the remarkable story of British journalist Luke Harding, who says he became the target of surveillance himself while reporting on Edward Snowden. Harding recently published the Snowden Files, the inside story of the world's most wanted man. On Friday, he revealed that while he was writing the book on his computer, paragraphs of the book would begin to self-delete. He repeatedly saw the cursor move rapidly from the left, gobbling text. And that wasn't the only time he felt he was being monitored. Luke Harding joins us now via Democracy Now! Video stream from the Guardian newsroom in London. Welcome back to Democracy Now!, Luke. Tell us what happened.
Well, before I do that, I think you have to understand the context, which is that for the first few months of last year after Snowden's leaks, both the US and the British governments were scrambling to find out what he'd taken, how much he'd taken, why he'd taken it, and were really kind of clueless. And so I think in that context, it's hardly surprising that the small number of journalists who were working on this material, including me, would have been targeted. What happened was that I was writing my book. I was about halfway through. I'd been to see Glenn Greenwald in Rio in Brazil to interview him, which was a kind of curious experience because Glenn is clearly very heavily surveilled by, I think, all sorts of people. Back at my home in the English countryside, I was writing kind of rather disparagingly, rather critically about the NSA and the damage these revelations had done to Silicon Valley. And I was sitting back, working offline, I have to say, and as you say, the text began rapidly deleting, and I thought, oh my goodness, what is going on here? This happened 4 or 5 times over a period of a month, to the point where I was actually almost kind of jokingly leaving little notes every morning to this kind of mysterious reader. And then at one point, one of my colleagues mentioned this in a newspaper interview in Germany, and it suddenly stopped. So I wrote this piece not because this was an especially sinister experience, but merely to kind of lay out the facts in what was another curious episode in an already quite surreal tale.
Luke, you describe in your most recent piece about an American who approached you when you were in Rio de Janeiro in Brazil.
Well, that's right. I mean, again, I said this, you know, I mean, it was quite funny in a way. Essentially, what happened was that I met Glenn at a hotel by the seafront. And we had to shift location several times because it was clear that there were various people who were trying to eavesdrop on our conversation. And we ended up in the business suite where we could actually physically lock the door behind ourselves. Subsequently, at my hotel, the Marriott, the next day, I was kind of accosted in the lobby by someone who looked as if they were straight out of CIA central casting with a kind of military haircut and neatly ironed khaki shorts. And basically he wanted to become my friend. He wanted to take me sightseeing. And it was a curious incident. I mean, you know, I say in my piece that he may have been a tourist because, of course, there's an innocent explanation for all of these things. But having talked to Glenn, one of the things he told me was that the CIA in Rio especially was very aggressive. Glenn's own computer had been stolen from the home where he shared with David Miranda just a few weeks previously. And it's clear that there was a lot of U.S. intelligence activity going on there.
Remind us, Luke Harding, about the day the GCHQ came to call on The Guardian.
Yeah, it was really, I think, one of the bizarrest episodes in the history of journalism. Essentially, the British government was extremely unhappy about our ongoing publication from June the 5th onwards of Snowden's files, of the PRISM revelations, of Verizon and so on. And we came under increasing pressure, private pressure, backdoor pressure from David Cameron, the British Prime Minister, who sent his most senior official, a guy called Sir Jeremy Hayward, to come and see us and basically say, we can do this nicely or we can go to law. In other words, he wanted this material back, and if we didn't give it back, we were going to be injuncted. In other words, police would seize our computers and kind of shut down our reporting operation. And we explained that this was pointless because Glenn had this stuff in Brazil, Laura Poitras, the filmmaker, had Snowden material in Berlin, the Washington Post similarly. But the British government wasn't listening. And this culminated in a hot Saturday morning last summer with 3 of my colleagues being forced to smash up our computers in an underground car park, 4 floors down from where I'm talking to you, watched by 2 spies from the British spy agency GCHQ, who took photos on their iPhones to record the event, brought along a special machine called a degausser, which looks like a microwave oven. So we had to post the pieces of our bashed up MacBooks into this degausser, which demagnetized them. And then these spies who are based in the English countryside in a small provincial town called Cheltenham. They don't get to London very often, the big city, and they left carrying bags of shopping, presents for their families. It really was a bizarre thing. And I think for anyone who cares about press freedom, a pretty chilling thing too.
While you were doing the work, while The Guardian was, and Glenn Greenwald was working for The Guardian, putting out the original pieces based on what Edward Snowden released from the National Security Agency, you write about how you were part of the small team holed up in a room at The Guardian. Describe the security you had, and even your computers not being linked to the internet.
Yeah, it's actually 1 floor up from here. So the computer smashing happened 3 floors down. The secret bunker was upstairs. And we knew that this was a serious, the material that Snowden had entrusted to us, that this was a very serious undertaking. And we had a clear mission from him, which was to not publish anything which would damage legitimate intelligence operations, but to reveal mass surveillance, which we now all know about. And so there were 7 or 8 of us, never any more than that, working in their room. We had security guards round the clock, 24 hours, making sure that nobody who shouldn't have been there was there. We left all electronics out, and we had 4 laptops and a PC, which had never been connected to the internet, which were brand new, air-gapped at all times. We papered over the windows so nobody could see in from outside. And actually, to be honest, we were also kind of working against the clock. There was a sense that we needed to get as many stories out as we could in a responsible way, because we didn't know when the British government would fall on us. And one other quite nice detail: cleaners were banned. Nobody was inside that room. So very quickly, I write in my book, it sort of resembled a kind of student dormitory with pizza wrappers, dirty coffee cups. It was a pretty insalubrious working environment.
Has the GCHQ, the Government Communications Headquarters, the equivalent of the NSA, and the NSA changed their practices in any way in this 8 months since all of this information has begun to come out?
Well, you would think the answer to that question, Amy, would be yes, but in reality, the answer is no. And I find it very depressing. I mean, it's been fascinating. I've been to the US several times researching the book, and there's clearly a very lively debate, a polarized debate going on, but what's happening politically is very interesting. In Britain, for certainly the first 4 or 5 months, the entire political establishment was asleep, and it's only really woken up, I'd say, in the last few months. And the message from David Cameron, the Prime Minister, has been really move along, nothing to see here. But I think inevitably one of the things you know when you look at these documents is that GCHQ and the NSA work so closely together. This becomes very clear. They're practically one entity. So I think the reforms or reforms that Obama announced in January, on January 17th, will inevitably affect the work of GCHQ as well.
And what do you think of President Obama's so-called reforms?
Well, I mean, I think reform is rather a grand word. It seems to me they're more face-saving tweaks, actually. I mean, the big takeaway is that the NSA will no longer listen to Angela Merkel's cell phone or that of other friendly leaders. But I've just been in Europe doing various literary events there, and people are scratching their heads wondering whether their prime ministers are sufficiently friendly to, whether that means they will be bugged or not. They simply don't know. On the big thing, which is, of course, the collection of American metadata, telephony data, tell me if I'm wrong, but that's carrying on. Okay, it may be administered by some new entity, but those programs which Ed Snowden very bravely exposed are still continuing. And
we just have 30 seconds. Google, Microsoft, have they changed their ways of operating at all as a result of all that has come out in the other big companies?
Well, I mean, I haven't noticed major changes. I have noticed absolute panic and a really massive kind of PR campaign to try and assure everybody, from us, senior Google executives who visited The Guardian, to the whole world, that they are not kind of complicit in this spying and have been coerced into collaborating. But I still think there's some kind of big questions about how deep their involvement in all this is.